Hey, and welcome back to the Cellarcast, the number one podcast in the world, the Cellarcast, episode 190? Oh god, I literally just got blindsided. Yeah, we're on 190. I just got blindsided because seconds before hitting record, I opened up a YouTube video and I got hit with the brand new YouTube UI. Hang on, am I recording this at the right volume? Okay, yes I am. It looked really loud on the readout on Audacity. I just got hit with the new YouTube UI, and that really threw me for a loop. I use a number of add-ons. I'm a plugin monster. I think Firefox calls them add-ons. I don't remember. And several of those are for improving my YouTube experience, which includes adding stuff to the UI. And ooh, yeah, the developers of those plugins have not made them compatible with the new one. It looks weird and messy, and you can tell that the buttons are not where the buttons are supposed to be. They don't fit into the UI. Very weird. I don't know if I think it's a terrible look. It's a lot bulkier, which I don't know if I love. It's weird. It's bulkier, but there's also more space. There's more open space. It's not quite as compact. I don't know. YouTube's UI gets worse in small way. Every 6 months, the UI gets a little worse, and that's been going on for 10 years, at least 10 years. Every 6 months, they just chip away at it. And they make it a little worse and a little worse, and they make decisions that are just a little worse. Like, okay, in the YouTube Studio, right? In YouTube Studio, which you're probably not that familiar with if you don't actively, upload videos and all that. The UI used to be, I would say, simple and fairly functional. You had the icons of the different categories on the left side, and then you clicked on them to go to different sections of the YouTube Studio. Your dashboard, the view of your content, analytics, community, and then whenever you clicked them, so the background was always a dark. Well, it depended on if you were in light mode or dark mode. I'm using dark mode, of course. So the background is a kind of a dark slate gray that YouTube has. Is it slate gray? I don't know. I just found out what taupe is, the color taupe. Apparently women know what taupe is. I didn't know what taupe was. It's like, so the background's like dark gray with a contrast of white. So the text and the icons had the text was in white and the icons were like white bordered. They were mostly borders, right? And then when you clicked on them, it would fill in red. The icons would fill in red, because that's the third color and it's the most contrasty with the other two. At some point a while ago, they just changed it, so they took out the red. So now it's just white. It just fills in white. It does not improve the UI at all. In fact, it makes it slightly harder to tell what you're looking at. It's not like a huge deal, but it's just like, oh, that's a little more difficult to understand. Just a tiny bit. Just a tiny bit from a glance. It's harder for me to pinpoint exactly with my eyes what part of the YouTube Studio interface I'm currently looking at. That happens every 6 months. They do something like that. It's great. I love it. Speaking of things that I love, we're gonna go to the comment review before I get into my week, because I wanna get this out of the way. We have a question from Sketz, who asks, question, where can I download MP3s of the Cellarcast episodes to put on my MP3 player for those long drives where I need my phone for GPS so I can't have YouTube playing? The answer is I had never thought about this. The Cellarcast is a podcast that I basically just do for fun. I don't think of it as a real enterprise or a business. And so I've never really bothered to put it on anything besides YouTube. In fact, it was until only very recently did I even have it officially labeled as a podcast in YouTube's actual system. YouTube introduced a classification for audio only stuff, or majority audio stuff, and you can label it as a podcast. That was a while ago, but it was well after I actually started doing the Cellarcast, and I just never bothered to label the show as such, which you can do fairly easily. You basically just take a playlist and mark that it's a podcast. And I finally went in and did that, which kind of leads me to a roundabout answer for your question. I have not looked into pure audio hosting services that offer downloads as of yet. I don't know if there's any that offer free ones. It's genuinely not my domain. It is not barely my business. The closest you'll probably get is downloading it straight from YouTube. Or, yeah, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. It's a little program called JDownload. JDownload is a software, or JDownloader. JDownloader is a software that I use to rip things off of the internet. It's a little funky because it's meant to be meant to be I don't know, it's very much made by programmers. So the interface isn't the smoothest, cleanest thing, and it's a little confusing. Where does stuff go and what format does it download in? But it is, in my experience, the best downloader for audio and video content. So what you do is you download JDownloader, and then you open it up, and you go to the section called Link Grabber. You go to the tab, then you copy the link. You can copy the link to the YouTube link to the podcast. Add new link on the bottom, and then only check audio file on the right. And then you can make sure that it's downloaded to a certain spot, a location. That's how I would do it now if I wanted to download something. It's very janky and hacked together. That's what I would do now. Or that's assuming you want a free version. You could also just pay for YouTube Premium, which allows you to download videos. Or you could maybe use. There's probably, if you've got an Android, you can probably use a YouTube front end, a Revanced, which is what I use. And I think that they have downloading features. I've never felt the need to download a YouTube video on my phone, but they've probably got that as well. So as of now, I'll probably look into stuff in the future. If leave a comment if you'd be interested in downloads. If I get a couple comments from people who are interested in actually downloading the podcast, I'll look into it more legitimately. But up till now, I've just never felt the need, felt the want. So yeah, I hope that's satisfactory. Probably not. But thank you for writing in, and if anyone else has any questions, you can leave them down in the comments below. But please write them in the form of a question, because I'm not just going to read your thoughts out loud. Anyway, that was the comment review. I want to talk a little bit about my week and some interesting things that I have observed. So there's this thing going around YouTube where a lot of people around the start of August notice a dip in their view counts. And this is going to be a YouTuber talking about the business of YouTube. But I find it interesting, so you're going to listen to it, or just skip it, I guess. So initially, the theories as to why this happened related to something called YouTube's restricted mode. Now, I want to preface this very quickly by saying that this type of stuff happens all the time. YouTube is okay, imagine if you worked at an office and suddenly came to work one day and at your desk, your desk had been replaced and your chair was different, and you sat down and it was oh, no, don't do that, or the chair is going to shock you. It's going to zap you. And you're okay, I can't lean a certain way or the chair's going to zap me. Why was this done? And they look at you and they go, I don't know. No one knows. They give you the silent treatment. And you're like, did everyone's chairs change? And they go, I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out. I can't find, oh! And they get zapped. And they go, okay, yeah, mine got changed. So the initial theory related to a change that YouTube announced a little while ago, which is that they were going to start enforcing more strict content moderation in the form of detecting people who were under 18, detecting users under the age of 18, and restricting what content they are allowed to watch. Nothing could go wrong with this. YouTube famously good with their auto-detecting algorithms. I've definitely never been impacted by it. Definitely don't have multiple warnings. They were never strikes. Definitely don't have multiple warnings on my channel because of the stupid fucking strike system. It's always worked out every single time. So initially, that was the theory, that YouTube was changing people's YouTube to restricted mode. It was changing it to something called restricted mode, which is an option if you just go up and click on your profile icon in the top right of the YouTube UI, at least on desktop. There's an option near the bottom called restricted mode, which essentially just takes out videos that the system deems inappropriate for one reason or another. What is inappropriate? Who knows? So as a quick check, I decided to go to my own channel, the main channel, and click restricted mode just to see what was going on. For reference, I've got maybe 120 something videos, maybe 130 on my main channel. I click restricted mode and my videos tab is decimated to about 21. 70-80% of my library wiped out by restricted mode. I was like, holy shit. Some of them I can understand, right? Like the Harvester video, maybe the TLC video. Other stuff where like I curse, I guess. But then there's like weird ones like my interviews or the console aesthetics video. So the kids can't know about visual product design. It's too dangerous. So that stuff was deemed inappropriate. And that was the leading theory for a while. And then there's a video by a YouTuber I quite enjoy. His name is Josh Strife Hayes. Actually, he's an MMO-focused YouTuber, and he mostly does videos about trying out different MMOs. He was actually a big inspiration for the Living Dead MMOs videos that I've done. I like his stuff quite a bit. And he made a video about this topic where he posited a new theory, which was actually that YouTube, this dip in viewership was actually the result of changes in the way that YouTube counts views depending on whether or not you have ad block on, which I think is a lot more interesting. The restricted mode theory definitely fits YouTube's sort of caveman-like approach in past years to just sort of take a cudgel to an issue with algorithmic logic. But the ad block thing actually fits a pattern of behavior that they've been on for a while of trying to beat the ad blockers because ads fucking suck. That's why I don't monetize my channel. That's actually kind of relevant later on because I have a little thing to add into this. So essentially, he gathered data from a bunch of people who fit a certain criteria. He acknowledged that it was definitely there was a selection bias because he was asking for people who had certain issues, but he got like 80 different responses from people who were all large channels that fit this particular criteria, and the number of people with this experience, I think it is like a significant, it is at least worth looking at. Essentially, his theory was that a lot of these people had large audiences, specifically who watched their videos on desktop from desktop browsers, computer, as YouTube labels it in their analytics. And these people, because of the type of content that they make, typically people with more niche interests, people a little bit more, I'll say, internet-y, who might be more or more experienced, more likely to be running an ad blocker, they saw a decrease in views, a sharp noted decrease in views, only from computers, only from desktop users, starting around August 10th, that also did not have any impact on revenue, which is interesting. So there is a decrease in computer desktop views, but no change in revenue, suggesting that those views were not being monetized, suggesting that they were using ad blockers. I thought that was very interesting, so I took a look at my own analytics, and I generally try to stay away from analytics a lot of the time. Usually it doesn't tell me stuff that's that interesting or that crazy. I basically know my audience at this point. The Cellar is a channel for 35-year-old men and 25-year-old trans women. That's what I've gathered so far. Now, what I did find, I've never actually looked at views by platform, and I found something kind of interesting, which is that, okay, take a wild guess. You would think that most of my views come from desktop users. Again, just because of the correlation, right? The type of audience that I have. No, most of my views historically have come from mobile. Yeah, most of my, like, by a decent margin, and not just like, okay, I had the Rogue Warrior video, which did inordinately well. Maybe more people watch that on their phones. No, that's true before the Rogue Warrior video. I historically have just had a higher viewership on mobile, which is really odd. Which also means that I don't see the dip in desktop views. But the other thing is that I'm not monetized, which I think is also interesting to note. I see no difference, no drop off in viewership from desktop users. But those people weren't monetized in the first place. No one watching my videos is technically monetized, unless you are watching a video that got copyright claimed. But it's not monetized for me. The money's not going to me. I do not monetize my videos directly. I only make money off of Patreon. And Coffee. Links in the description. And I actually think that the fact that I'm not monetized and I don't see the trend, it could also be kind of an indicator that the theory might hold some water. As usual, YouTube has made no communication about this. They just kind of like let us figure it out. They let us figure out how our job works. There's a reason why I've taken to calling the algorithm the spirits or the great spirit, because it's the YouTube algorithm might as well be some like new age spiritualist religion, where just, you know, the flow of energy or whatever does this or that, whatever it wants. Anyway, I hope you're watching my videos with an ad block. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Anyway, I want to talk about some other stuff that's been getting my... I really wish getting my goat, for some reason, I want that to me it sounds like ameliorative, but it's actually a pejorative. It's when something is like pissing you off. But I'm like, man, this is really getting my goat. What's the opposite of... Hang on, so getting my goat. Getting my goat. Yeah, okay. So it's to be annoyed. Getting my goat, opposite. Yeah. What would be the opposite of gets my goat? Like an equal. Okay, these are synonyms. No. I've never heard the word ballyrag to annoy. You're really ballyragging me right now. Let's see. Soothe, satisfy, please, placate. No, these aren't. Delight, gratify. No, these aren't. This isn't like. I want like a good phrase. I want a phrase. Looks like there are no phrases. What's the opposite of a goat? Hang on, what? Is there what's the opposite of a goat? Opposite. Yeah, opposite of goat. Let's see. From Shower Thoughts 7 years ago. The opposite of goat, greatest of all time, is a toad. Terrible on any day. It's really getting my toad. That sounds kind of lewd. That sounds kind of okay. I don't know if I like that. Yeah. Anyway, what I've been enjoying is the new Flesh and Blood set. That's what I mean. That's what I mean to say. Superslam. I mentioned it before a few episodes ago. So Superslam is a set that I was not interested in when they first announced it. The nice thing about Fab, as I've said before, is that a lot of sets you just don't have to be interested in, even if you want to be on like the cutting edge of the meta, because most sets are focused on specific classes and talents, which are like the subtypes for heroes. And so if you are this is a Brute and Guardian set, and it introduces 2 new talents, which are kind of like opposite sides of the same coin. If you aren't interested in those, if you aren't already invested in like the Brute or Guardian card pool, and you're not interested in building the new heroes, you can just ignore it. It's going to have, so that's the reason that I and many other people were not interested in it. But I've found that as they've revealed more of the set, the opinion has really shifted. We went from a really hyped set, High Seas, which was very well received. Some people are a little cooler on it now that we've had some time to actually see the results of its additions and the heroes that it introduced. But now we've got a set that a lot of people were like, I'm not interested. And now there's a lot more interest in it. A big aspect of that, to be fair, has to do with the fact that the expansion slots, which are the expansion slots and the reprints. The expansion slots being cards printed out for heroes outside of the main focus of the set. The expansion slot cards are really good. Well, some of them are. There's some really good cards in there. Some much needed support for certain heroes. There is a dog shit hero named Olympia who has a strong fan base because they want him to be cool and they want him to be good. He's getting like 4 cards printed just for him that probably are not going to make him like crazy busted or anything because he's kind of inherently flawed. But it definitely gives him like a cool thing to do during the game. It makes him more interesting, which I think is a good direction to take a fundamentally pretty like underwhelming hero. I am personally not that happy with the Ranger support. There was one card, like a general Ranger card, that's like an anti-arcane thing that is, it's pretty good, you know? It's a good card to have around. There's a card printed specifically for Marlin, who I have been trying to main for a while, that feels like it was made by people who don't really play the hero that much. Again, without going too much into specifics, Marlin is a character who has some really good, like, pop-off moments, but generally lacks the ability to get long-term value over the course of the game, and just sort of ends up losing against anything that isn't, like, an extremely aggro, like, burn bright, burn fast kind of strategy. And in addition to the fact that she just feels like she's missing a couple cards. She feels like she just needs a few more cards and some equipment that synergizes better with her play style. And this, they're releasing a new card specifically for her, for a Pirate Ranger, that only really helps her in situations where, like, in matchups where she was already winning, but doesn't really do anything to address her core issues. Like, I guess I'll run it. I'll probably run 3 copies of it. But it'll probably be like $1 per copy. And for good reason. It's not going to flip her into an extremely relevant deck anytime soon. And in fact, they have said in blog posts that they are aware of her struggles, that she's a struggle bus character, and that they are going to be giving her support over multiple sets, which I find really funny. Because generally within any TCG, there's about at least a 6-month lag between something being designed and hitting the shelves. 6 months is like the fastest you'll get between design, art, final copy, whatever, printing, to distribution. There's at least 6 months. That's just the way that the industry goes. Oftentimes up to a year. So there's like a year's worth of catch up that hero is going to be getting. But for the most part, a lot of the expansion card slots are pretty cool. The reprints are great. There's a lot of cards that are just stupidly expensive that are getting reprints in this set to bring the price down. Some of them have been very successful already before the sets even hit shelves. Some notable cards dropping from like $70 a fucking copy to like $30, which is ridiculous. Again, you still need 3 copies of them, but you would still want 3 copies. So it's still like $90-ish, $100 with shipping. But man, that's way better than 70 times. That's still better than paying like $200, over $200 for 3 pieces of cardboard. So I think that was the first thing that got people to start warming up to this set, was that even if you didn't play it, it felt like there's some pretty cool stuff going on for other players, right, who are not in the main target demographic. I wouldn't be, because they had a massively expanded number of expansion slot cards. There's like 30 compared to the maybe 12 that they do for other sets. I wouldn't mind if other sets had this large of an expansion slot category. This is kind of cool. I like this. But the actual the core of the set itself seems really fun. I'm going to a pre-release event on Friday, and I'm actually very excited to get my hands on some of the cards and just build a random deck and probably go to some draft events. And because they seem really fun. I've talked about the theme before, but it's called Superslam. It's wrestling themed. They have 2 new talents which represent the faces and the heels, the revered and the reviled heroes. And I love the flavor on a lot of the reviled cards specifically. Like, they seem really fun because they're all about cheating. Like, there's a new card. Okay, so there's a mechanic called Clash. When a card triggers a Clash, essentially, you both players flip the top card of their deck, and assuming they're both attacks, whichever attack has the higher power wins the Clash, and the winner gets some kind of a reward based on whatever the Clash card was, whatever the card that triggers it was. If it's like a non-attack, or it doesn't have any power, then it's an automatic loss. If both players draw, I think it's draw, or there's no attack, it's nobody wins. There's a card in the reviled pool that's called, hang on. There's 2 cards. Okay. One is called Fix the Match, which is where you just it's an attack, and when you play it, you can just search for your whole deck for a card and put it on top of your deck. And then whenever the opponent defends, whenever they block fix the match, you clash and the winner gets like a thing that buffs your next attack. I wonder what card I want to put on top of my deck. Perhaps Overturn the Results? A card literally called Overturn the Results, which reads, if you would fail to win a clash, revealing this card, instead you win the clash and the crowd boos you, which is a reviled mechanic. The crowd boos you, and that triggers certain things to happen depending on your hero or other cards. So the whole gimmick is Overturn the Results gets put on top. It has 5 power, which is kind of in the middle. It's kind of like a median power level. You fail to win if you fail to win the clash, which you have like a somewhat decent chance of, depending on the matchup, being like a 5 power attack. You win anyway, and then the crowd goes, "Boo! You're a cheater!" What a fun idea for a card. A lot of their cards have these little stipulations where they seem bad until something happens and they cheat their way into being good. Like, there's a card called Mocking Blow. It's a 0 cost for 1 power, which is minuscule. The average for a 0 cost, you should be getting at least 4, assuming there's no other upside. If there's an additional upside, maybe 3, but not really less than that. So it's a 0 for 1, and you're like, why is it so low? When this attacks a hero, if you have more life than them, the crowd boos you. And if you've been booed this turn, it gets +4. So the whole idea is that you are being like a bully. You're the heel, and you're being the bully. You're attacking someone with less life than you. The crowd boos you. And then that actually makes your attack stronger. It makes it above rate. It makes it 0 for 5, which is fun. A lot of like triggers like that. The heroes themselves are really neat. Of course, the heroes being kind of the centerpiece of these identities. A new version of a brute called KO. KO's idea is that, so brutes have always been like a kind of gambling class. They have a lot of random chance built into their class identity based on rolling dice or drawing and discarding cards, and then depending on like a random card that you discarded, you'll get a bonus effect. That's always kind of been a thing with them. And KO is a brute who was specifically, like, the original version of KO was, at least the adult version, was built around cheating the odds. So they have this whole thing where if you discard a card at random, which many of their cards do as like additional cost, draw a card and then discard a random card. If the discarded card happens to be of 6 or more power, you get a bonus. Old KO's effect was to basically give all of your attacks +1 power, as long as they're not attacking. And you're like, well, what is the point of that? It's so that when you randomly discard them, they meet the 6 power requirement. So that's his like little cheating way, so that you can run slightly less powerful cards that are also worth more resources, because the more resources a card is worth, generally the lower its power is, like its attack will be. So you can run those without sacrificing the consistency of landing your gambles, your good gambles. So there are literally builds of KO where unless you hit like a non-attack or something like that, you will just never ever lose one of those random triggers. KO, Underhanded Cheat, the new one from Superslam, who is reviled. You can just make a target action you control. A target attack action card you control has 6 base power. And then whenever the crowd boos you, create a vigor, which just gives you like additional resources on the next turn. So he can immediately make something worth 6 power. And then that synergizes with the other kind of reviled, a common thing in their card pool, which is that they have these very underrate attacks that have low power until you give them you fulfill some kind of requirement, and then they get a buff. And you can just basically give those a super buff by making them 6 at base, and then also increasing their power. So just out of nowhere, a huge blast. So that's fun. The identity of the Guardian. The Guardian. I have no idea how he's going to play. His name is Lyeth. He's a little guy. He's a little dwarf guy, which I find... So one thing about the Flesh and Blood world is that there are... Okay, so it's like a dark fantasy setting. And they don't have, like, fantasy dwarves. They just have little people. There are, like, little people, but they're not considered, like, their own species or anything. Like dwarves or halflings or something like that. As far as I can tell in the lore, they are just human beings, which is kind of funny to say out loud. But yeah, Lyeth, his whole deal is that he is a short little guy and he is evil as fuck. And he's a little piece of shit. He is the first hero to have 5 base intelligence, which means that his default hand size is 5 compared to the average 4, which gives him access to way more resources than basically anyone else by default. And to make up for this, the power and defense of all of his cards are halved. So he has to deal with like an inherent debuff to his cards. But he has ways to, whenever he gets booed, the first attack on his next turn will get boosted. It gets boosted. Haha. And you know, this pairs very well with a new set of cards such as Goon Battery, Goon Beatdown, and even the terrifying Goon Tactics, which are all real cards from this set. And they're common. They're common too. So like, there's going to be a lot. I'm going to pre-release, I'm going to go to draft. I'm going to have a lot of copies of Goon Battery. I got to charge up my Goon Battery. The other side of the coin, the revered heroes, are perhaps like a little less interesting and less interesting in the sense that like they're breaking the rules, which I find fun about the reviled guys. But the revered heroes are more based around honest, good numbers. They're more on rate. They're a little more defensively oriented, but I have to say, like, it sounds very boring on paper, but the way that they're actually executed seems really fun. Tough Nut, who's the new revered brute, has only 3 intelligence, so he has a smaller hand size. And what I find fun about him is that it essentially creates, like, a deck building challenge. Because his ability is to pitch the top card of your deck. Meaning that you get to use the top card of your deck as a resource as opposed to having to give one up from your hand. So, if you want to pack a bunch of resources, like play a lot of 3-pitch cards, which is the max amount that max amount of resources a card can be worth. How do you balance that with power cards or your weapon or something? There's a lot of like fun builds that people have been coming up with, and he's sort of like he's kind of become like, the more cards we've seen from him, kind of a fan favorite. People have really warmed up to Tough Nut, which is great because his whole deal in the lore is that he's just a lovable oaf. And man, that's exactly how he comes across to the player base. People love Tough Nut. He's a big funny guy, and He's just... I feel like there's not a lot of like serious... There won't be a lot of serious Tough Nut players. Anyone who mains Tough Nut is doing it because they think he's funny, which I think is great to have in a game. Just a character that you play because you think he's really funny. The other one who's a little more serious is Pleiades, who is the new revered guardian. And she actually seems extremely fun because she has a unique gimmick for a guardian, which is that she's based around these auras. Auras are just cards that you play, and they kind of float around on the battlefield, and maybe they have an act, like some kind of passive effect, or a lot of them have an effect when they, like, they'll be on the field for a few turns and then get destroyed, and then you'll get some kind of buff when they're destroyed, something like that. She is specifically themed around auras of suspense, which have these suspense counters. Each one comes in with 2 suspense counters, and then at the start of your turn, you remove one. Most of them have an effect when they leave. They get destroyed if they have no suspense counters on them. So you get these kind of cool, thematically fun ideas, such as, let's see, what's one of the suspense counter ones? I'm looking at the whole card pool right now. Something like Act of Glory, an aura of suspense that says when this leaves the arena, your next attack this turn gets +6. That's for 4 costs, which is relatively, I would say relatively on rate for a buff that pays off in 2 turns. But there's a little twist. See, I want to say, yeah, basically, I think all of the auras of suspense are instants. They can all be played at instant speed, meaning in response to anything, including stuff on your opponent's turn. Pleiades' effect is that one of her effects is that she can remove a suspense counter from an aura and then move that onto a different aura if she wants to. So you can do stuff like when your opponent declares that they're going to end their turn, that actually creates a priority window where you can respond by playing an instant. So on their turn, you can play something like Act of Glory, and then their turn ends, your turn begins, a suspense counter leaves Act of Glory, and then you can tap Pleiades, remove the remaining suspense counter, and you get an instant +6 buff. You're probably only going to have 2 cards in hand left, but that's like kind of a lot of burst damage for a Guardian. So she has like these little tricks and stuff, and you can manage them. That's like a simple example. Once you have a lot of these auras out, they release this gameplay video on their channel. And if you have a couple of them out, you can do some really interesting juggling with suspense counters, such as there's a card called The Suspense is Killing Me. It's an aura of suspense. It does not have an effect when it gets destroyed. It just says your first attack each turn gets +1. So you can... They show off the Pleiades player in this gameplay video continuously setting up these like buffing auras, destroying, using Pleiades to remove suspense counters from them, to destroy them, add them onto The Suspense is Killing Me, so that he has like 4 counters on it. And then instead of only having like 2 turns of value, so getting like 2 + 2 out of it, getting 4 turns of value out of the first attack buff, which I think is great. Guardians are a little bit maligned in the game for having a very linear play style. They just kind of block and then swing with their weapon, and then occasionally throw a big attack. So I think having a Guardian who actually has an interesting gimmick and fun little tricks like that, and a cool little management game, is a really good idea. I think it's very inspired, and a lot of people who don't even play Guardian at my store are now interested in Pleiades because she looks really fun. Like, I might build her at pre-release. I don't know. Depends on what I pull. So the set so far seems like really cool. I'm actually a lot more excited for it than I anticipated, and I'm also very excited for those prices to be brought down by the reprints, because some of those cards I really need. Specifically the ones for my main man, Florian. Florian was a deck that I had always I'd been tooling around with a little bit in the lead up to High Seas, before I was going to switch to playing Marlin. Marlin has... I made the decision that I was probably just going to switch off of Marlin entirely for the time being and just go to Florian until she gets some more significant support. For a few reasons. Number one, she is not very good. And number two, she is especially bad into my local meta. The thing about physical card games that might not occur to you if you don't like go and play in person a lot is that whatever in the world can be running rampant in the meta, whatever is the top deck in the meta. But if no one plays that at your store or any of the stores you go to, that really doesn't matter. It doesn't actually matter at all to you. So my local meta, there's I'm thinking about okay, who are the most common of the people that I play with? What are the most common classes that I run into? Warrior, Assassin, and Guardian. What are Rangers notoriously bad into? Warriors, Assassins, and Guardians. Warriors and Guardians, because they can just block out most of what Rangers want to do. They just have the defense to nullify you. And Assassins, because they are so disruptive to your hand and your deck and stuff that it really throws a wrench into the Ranger plan, which kind of relies on being a well-oiled machine of consistent value. Those are all the people who play at my local. So it might... So not only am I playing a generally weak hero, I'm also playing into some of the worst matchups. And I figured, okay, what is good into those specific classes? And I was just looking at stats. I was just looking at online stats from the unofficial, pulled from the API of the unofficial online simulator client, which is called Talishar. Based on online games, rough estimate of what do matchups look like. And it just turns out that Florian is just sort of good into all of those classes. Or at least much more even. And I was already building him for fun, casually. So I figured, why not just pivot directly into Florian for the time being? Because he's good, and good into my locals. Now, there was one slight hiccup with this, which is that Florian has a card called Germinate. Germinate is what's known as a specialization, or a spec, meaning that it is only playable in a specific hero. It is a Florian specialization. You don't really have to know what it does, besides the fact that it gives him a late-game win condition. Now, a little while ago, there was this really fucked up Florian build, which was essentially a one-turn kill. And if you didn't die in that one turn that they got the big pop-off, you almost certainly died on the next one. The Florian OTK build was sort of unplanned for, and it was just a confluence of things in the game. And it caused him to start rising in the Living Legend leaderboard a lot faster than I think they wanted. I think they want most heroes to last at least a year, if not 2 years. And Florian is not a hero. If you take out the OTK deck, he is just a generally good hero. He's just good. You'd call it A tier, but not super busted broken overall. So they made a very wise choice in banning the one specific card, which was a weapon, that enabled the OTK strategy. At the same time, they also banned Germinate, which was a very unpopular decision, because it essentially, Florian is a character who builds up slowly. He's kind of a slow roll, and then he hits like the mid to late game. He reaches certain thresholds that activate his hero ability, and then he like starts just throwing mountains of damage at you. That's like the identity of the hero. And Germinate is key to that. It enables him to do that. It's his late game win condition. They claimed that it was because Germinate made him like too inevitable, which I think like isn't that the point of the hero? But also that there was a different card that was going to be released in High Seas that would have comboed too well with it. And essentially the combo is just that it allows you to take Germinate from your graveyard and put it back into your deck on the bottom, which in the late game means you're going to run into it pretty quickly. So it was generally seen as an overcorrection, and people didn't like it. It just kind of made the hero feel a lot worse into matchups that he should feel better into. And so Germinate was maybe like a $5-6 card for the longest time. Germinate gets banned. And I'm sitting here thinking about how lame it is that I can't play with Germinate. Not just because, well, for one, it's banned. For two, I actually didn't own it. Because again, it was like $15. I just didn't feel like shelling out the cash at the time to get a full playset for $15. Plus shipping and stuff. Grumble. So after the ban, I figured, I wonder what that did to the price. So I go look at the market price for Germinate, and it's dropped to like 30 cents a copy. And I'm like, I really don't think that ban is gonna stick. I really feel like they're going to undo that. They're gonna unban it at some point. Why don't I just order 3 copies? I'm already gonna order a bunch of other cards, which are like, pennies on the dollar, to finish out my deck. Why don't I just order 3 Germinates? So I do so. The Germinates come in. 1 week later, new ban list comes out. Germinate, unbanned completely. The price instantly jumps to $7 per copy. And I felt like the Wolf of Wall Street. I felt so good. I got a little investor's high. When you make a good call like that, when you make a call like that and you're rewarded, I should have bought more. I should have bought 6 copies and then sold them. Although I don't know how many people want Germinate that don't already have it. But still, that's where my mind was at. So now I've got 3 legitimate copies of Germinate. And he feels way better. Wow, he feels way better with Germinate. I made 16 rune chants off it the other night. It fucking ruled. It was great. 16? Hang on, is that how the math works out? If you pitch 9 for it, you get, that's 8 divided by 2 is 4 plus 1, 5, 10, 12. Okay, yeah. And whatever the math worked out to. So I kind of felt like a genius. And I'm probably just going to be building Florian from now on and playing that. And guess what? I beat an assassin player the other night fairly handily. And I was like, wow, it's kind of crazy to play a real hero into a real matchup. So that's going swell. I'm very excited. Very excited for the future. This set seems fun. I'm excited to go to pre-release this week. Check out Flesh and Blood. It's the best fighting game on the market. With absolutely nothing. Actually, no way. Sort of speaking of money, budgets. I don't know. There was an article released on a Substack called HushCrasher, which is a data-driven, I guess, blog. They've got one article. It's about analyzing video games with data. And hey, I like looking at some data. This article is entitled, by the way, What's a Double A? It's by Antoine Meyerowitz and Julie Belzan. I think I'm saying that correctly. Essentially, the goal of this article is to create a more objective definition of terms like double, AAA, indie, or maybe to come up with some terms of their own that are more accurate. This is an interesting article, and I actually like a lot of parts of it, and I find the data really fascinating. I don't know if it's perfect, and they have admitted that this is like a revision 1 of their methodology, so it could very well be refined in the future. But I find this to be really interesting and worth talking about. So essentially, the goal of this project was to take the ambiguity out of how we define the scope of a game. These are definitions for the scope, from like basically, essentially budgets. What is the budget? Which also implies how much it's expected to make back. Double A and AAA actually come from the bonds industry. Those are like the initial usage of it, and they're I believe related to the security or the safety, the risk factor of a given investment. So I'll read directly. The good news is that there is a whole strand of data science dedicated to finding groups of similar elements based on their characteristics, known as clustering. So this is basically they took a bunch of different factors which are available via API from Moby Games. It is data from all games published on Steam since 2006, cross-referenced with stuff from Moby Games to provide additional information, because Moby Games has their own API. And then they've broken down into a bunch of different categories and then found which categories caused the most consistent clustering to basically break down what qualities of a game's scope correspond the most strongly with each other. And what they came down to, interestingly enough, was the length of the credits and the size on disk. Now, immediate criticisms of this, although I do like this in general, are that these are a little bit wiggly, and don't necessarily tell a whole story. Ideally, you would have the budgets for every single game, but we just don't. Ideally, you would want the budget for every game. So instead, what they've done is they found that the number of credits, not counting so the number of credits, not counting, I think, like double ups or people who maybe pulled double, triple duty, unique people who worked on a game. It also excludes special thanks, because that's very difficult to quantify, and it excludes playtesters, which is probably maybe the most controversial part of this. I understand why they did it, because it's also quite difficult to quantify how many, like sometimes it's outsourced, the rates of pay can be different. There's also the fact that playtesting can be done by the devs. There's a lot of reasons that playtesting can be a little weird when trying to track the contributions to the team, because it is one of the most commonly outsourced positions. I'm very pro respect to playtesters. I think that they're an integral part of the game development process. So it's unfortunate that it excludes them, but I kind of get it. I would be interested to see how the data changes if you do include playtesters. But let's just take this as it is for the moment and say, okay, so number of unique entities with a Moby Games identifier. That is how they define, excluding special thanks and playtesters. That is how they define credits count. And then size on disk. So size on disk is not like the most accurate. There is some wiggle room there as well, because the size can be... I mean, certain things can cause outliers. For instance, the big hubbub about why does this game take up like 500 gigabytes on my PS4? And it's because the developers force you to download the 4K texture pack that you never use, which has also led to optional downloads of texture packs and stuff like that. Technically, you can make a game with like... one person could put together a game with NES graphics, but also include, like, I don't know, an entire 4K video file of The Dark Knight and jack up the game size tremendously from what it would be otherwise. So again, not a perfect... in like a logical sense, there's holes that you can poke with the size on disk. But apparently these have the highest correlation to each other. Or the highest correlation in the sense that they create the most clusters. They have the most things in common. Now, with this data, they create a pretty interesting chart, which they break down into actually 4 distinct categories. And they've come up with some of their own terminology for this, which some people don't like. There was some criticism of like, I don't like this term. I don't really care. They have eschewed the word indie because indie is too vague. Technically, like indie, I've talked about this before. Indie is a kind of very difficult term to get any use out of. This was exposed with like the whole, is Dave the Diver an indie game? Because technically the original meaning was self-published, but now a lot of stuff is self-published. Assassin's Creed is developed and published by Ubisoft. Assassin's Creed, by that definition, is an indie game. So are tons of games from big publishers and developers. Capcom is a self-publisher. Street Fighter 6 is an indie game. A funny thing that was pointed out to me the other day, outside of the realm of video games, the Star Wars prequels are all independent films. Self-financed, self-produced, top to bottom, all owned by George Lucas through his own companies. Basically, it is about as indie as you could get. It's just at a massive scale. So is independent a useful descriptor? Yeah, in some sense, if you want to talk about the relationship between maybe what are the certain like financial pressures on projects, if they have an outside publisher or distributor that they have to worry about. But for the scope, when you really get honest about the meaning, as close as you can get to an objective meaning for the term indie, it kind of falls apart. It's not really that useful. So they have broken this down into 4 categories, which they kind of also blob into two larger categories of bigger games and smaller games, top end and bottom end. So in the top end, you've got AAA and AA games. AAA games are anything with like, hang on, there's a more specific chart, or a chart with more explicit numbers, a more detailed one. I would love an interactive version of this to see what games qualify for what. So for just like reference, this is divided. So just for reference of how the graph looks, linked down below, it's essentially just like a scatter plot, where from the bottom left to the top right, so going upwards, there is just like a median line of this seems to be like the bottom end. There aren't that many things below this. And then from the top left to the bottom right, kind of cutting across that, are where they make their divisions. So a AAA game is generally, if you've got a team of 4,000, you must be a AAA game. There's that is the you cannot have more people than that and qualify for anything else. If you have a size of 700 gigabytes or larger, you must be a AAA game. Those are like the extremes. That also means that you could have a team of 2,000 people with a size of 300 gigs or 200 gigs, and you are still firmly in the AAA space. Below that, you have the wider margin of AA games. So applying the same idea. If you have a team of 500 people, automatically AA. If you have a size of, let's see, what's the minimum here? Well, 700, yeah, a size of, am I reading that correctly? I want to say I'm reading that correctly. It looks like team size actually, I'm not sure about the team size thing. Team size to game size. I don't know if there's like a, I'm not a data scientist. You think I took a statistics class? Also because like the way that it's split is in like an odd, it's like an odd rectangular shape with like the top cut off. If you look at the graph, you'll see why it's a little difficult to like tell exactly what is the minimum game size to be considered a AA game. You could be a 4 gigabyte game, but if you have a team of 500 people, you can be AA. I'll stop trying to be perceptive. Now we get into the lower end. So that's like the top, the higher end, right, of the spectrum. Now we get into the lower end where they have come up with 2 of their own categories, 2 of their own labels. So below AA are what you might consider. So okay, so I'll for reference, a AAA game. The example they give is Red Dead Redemption 2. A AA game is something like Clair Obscure. Below that, they have what they call MIDI games, which is actually, I believe, a clothing term. It is somewhere between small and large, medium-ish. MIDI. It's like a MIDI length. The example they give is The Outer Wilds. The Outer Wilds, Hades, Valheim, generally what a lot of people would commonly call larger indies. It's just a more specific larger indies. So, for instance, a team size of like 70 will guarantee that you are in the MIDI category, probably just based off of like budget requirements. Those are MIDI games. Small and medium studios. They are between the intimacy of, well, spoilers, and the larger ambition of AA's. And then let's get to the smallest category. Well, it's not the smallest category, but it is the smallest scope category. It's actually the largest in terms of sheer volume. They call it K-E-I, named after the K car, which is like a very compact style of Japanese car. They define this as what many would call solo dev games. Popular examples are Undertale, Papers, Please, or Terraria. While they are often the work of a lone creator, they can also be made by a couple of friends or siblings. The term K captures this sense of small scale in reference to Japan's famously tiny car. I'm not a car guy, I'd never heard of it. So, if you cross-reference like the methodology that they used with certain games, generally something made by a small team where most of the roles are fulfilled by 1 or 2 or 3 people. Also tends to limit the scope of the game, like the size of the game's literal like storage space. And then maybe including like translators and localizers for other regions would generally be considered a K game. So again, the methodology is not entirely perfect. They go on to use a couple other. This is what the data that they input found created clusters. So I think that that's worth looking at, and I think it's also a more interesting way of looking at the data. They go on to talk about certain trends in the industry because they also track stuff over time, how much of the market is represented by what categories of games, and how much, both in how much is coming out and what is actually making money. So, according to their definitions, there is this break point around 2012. They mark this as when Steam Greenlight gets introduced, which was Steam's big opening to small independent creators. It was a big disaster. It has since been reeled in. There's a reason you don't hear about Steam Greenlight anymore. After this point, starting in like 2013 and 2014, the number of K games released, K scope games, increases dramatically, exponentially, to the point that in 2024, they account for 75% of all releases. It is the largest sector of the market is in these small team, solo dev, or very small team, like below 10 people, K games. Followed by MIDI games, and then AA and AAA. AAA being the very smallest slice. However, interestingly enough, if you look at sales data, so, okay, compare this to the sales data. Caveat here, they do not have the sales data for every game ever released. It's not always public. It can vary by platform. What they've done, and again, this is it's not a perfect methodology, but I think it's decent, is use the number of reviews that each game has. Because the number of reviews is like a indicator for it's a conservative indicator of how many people have bought and played the game. Kind of the same way that comments, the ratio of views to comments on a YouTube video, is an indicator of your audience. A video with 2 million views might have 300 comments, right? So just going by using reviews as a proxy for sales, each sector takes up about a quarter of the market. Again, this is mainly looking at Steam, so it's not complete. They say, sure, there are more K games available, but are people actually buying them? The truth is, the shock, this is being they call it the indie shock, or the K shock, going by their terminology, which happened as digital distribution mediums, or digital distribution channels opened up, as well as more accessible consumer-level game-making software like Unity. Game Maker became more accessible to people. This created a big. This is again around 2012. Created what they call a shock to the market, which caused this huge surge in representation for K scope games. The shock was so important that the market simply couldn't absorb it. Despite making up 75% of new releases in 2024, the share of reviews allocated to K games hasn't changed for a decade. It remained remarkably stable, never getting above about 25%. So they have another graph here, which tracks the number of reviews, the share of total reviews by scope, by level. So there's a couple like spikes, for instance, in 2015, because again, this is going by Steam reviews. In 2015, GTA 5 and Rainbow Six Siege are released on PC. There's a massive spike in review share in the AAA space, which kind of cuts into everything else. Okay, naturally. Then around 2017, PUBG hits a huge surge in players. PUBG is what they consider it a MIDI game. Now there's a big hump in the MIDI area. And all of these categories kind of ebb and flow as big games come out, impactful games with big audiences come out in these different categories. Of course, not all games are created equal, quoting from the article. Many are never played. In fact, 4 out of 10 games released in 2024 haven't even received 10 reviews. Some are likely bad, but most are certainly just less visible, lost in the overwhelming flood of competing titles. This is where the real picture comes in. K games have definitely swamped the market, but they haven't exactly taken away the sales. If there's competition, it's among K games themselves. What we're seeing is an almost perfect split, each segment claiming a quarter of the market. So you get almost this gradient of quantity versus number of sales. There's a ton of K games. A ton. But most of them make no money and are very cheap to begin with. Like, typically maybe $5, $10 or less. On the flip side, there are fewer AAA games. Way fewer. It's the vast minority of the market are AAA games, due to the cost to produce them and the number of people involved and typically the length of time that it takes to produce them. But because of their marketing, because of their presence, typically they have a push from a larger publisher or a brand name, they just make way more money per game. And then in between you have these these in-betweeners of MIDI and AA, which makes sense to me. Yes. So they have another graph claiming to show K Games revenue collapsed after 2012. So in 2014, K Games grew by 70%. There were 70% more of them. Revenue fell by 75%. So massively oversaturated market. Obviously, because it's a lot easier to make them. They say on a more positive note, the K-apocalypse is not just about destruction. The very same factors that led to market saturation, lower entry costs, and facilitated distribution have also led to a remarkable diversification of the industry. Developers can now create titles for very specific niches, knowing that even a few hundred sales can make the project worthwhile. Which is, I think, why these numbers are so consistent. They go on to say, players won't stop buying AAA because of the latest K game. In fact, they are probably not even the same players at all. And this might be a story for another time. This segmentation is also reflected in their retail prices, which are almost evenly spaced between each category. A K game costs only a few bucks, around $17 for MIDI games, $40 for AA's, and $60 for most AAA's available on Steam. And I think, in my personal experience, just anecdotally, that also kind of bears out. I am not much of a AAA gamer. I play tons of games all the time. I rarely engage with what you'd call AAA. Maybe AA, a lot of MIDI titles. I actually went and used their methodology to break down a couple games on my own. So I want to talk about that real quickly. So I began with the controversial game, Dave the Diver. So going by about 162 people, 14 of those being testers. So using the same methodology, take them out. 55 of those were thanks, leads to a dev team of about 38 people. 38, 40, let's call it 40 people. Judging by what's listed on Steam, it takes up 10 gigabytes on the disk. This puts it firmly in the middle of the MIDI category. It's just in the middle there. It's not quite AA. It's what a lot of people kind of got the vibe of. It feels like a maybe larger budget indie game. It's got a little more polish. It's got a publisher behind it, you know. Guilty Gear Strive, about 400 developers, and about 30 gigs on disk. I believe that's before DLC. Before or after DLC, I'm not quite sure. That lands it solidly in the AA category. And yeah, that feels about right. It's definitely a bigger, more costly game than something like Dave the Diver, but I don't know if I'd compare it to like a Call of Duty. Just in scope. And again, we don't know the budgets. Maybe it costs more than Call of Duty, but again, it kind of lines up with the feel. And then finally, Baldur's Gate 3, a game with about... I'm amazed at how many people worked on this. About 1,700 people. Size of about 150 gigs. Lands it in the AAA category. On the slightly... And again, going by this metric, it is like slightly, like it's not like right in the middle where they put other games such as Red Dead Redemption 2. It is like it's in the smaller cluster that's near the bottom. RDR2 would be like really top end Mondo. Like this is probably where that would be where GTA 6 is going to go, you know? But it's on like the lower end of AAA, just the slightly lower end where mostly, or I'd say maybe more like the average end, because it's more like there's just a couple big outliers from gargantuan mega games. And again, a lot of people like me engage largely with games that are maybe $5 to $30 on average. That's like generally our price range, and we play games that are a little smaller and we're generally content with that, or we get stuff on sale. I think a lot of people are like me, and they kind of tap out at maybe around a AA game. And every once in a while, if I've got a big attachment to it, if it's like a Street Fighter game, I'll shell out the $60 for the AAA experience. They go on to say, why don't we get more open-world platformers? A game's scope inherently dictates its genre possibilities, which means that by setting that scope, developers often tie their hands creatively. A K open world would be a suicide mission, while hiring thousands of people to create a simple 2D platformer may be interesting, but would certainly be a money pit. Which, yeah, makes sense. Not every game needs a massive, gigantic team. It might just not demand it. Like, have you ever been doing a school project and you're in groups of 4, but it's really a 3-person job, and you're the person who's left out, and you just feel bad. You feel like a parasite. One way to gauge these differences is to look at the game tags that are overrepresented or underrepresented within each group. This reveals the usual suspects. Multiplayer and co-op are common for what they call A games, double and AAA, while 2D and pixel graphics are distinctive of smaller scopes. This makes sense from an economic perspective, as the latter are much cheaper to make than the former. However, recent multiplayer K hits such as Lethal Company and Peak might be a turning point. And there's a really neat graph where they show... I don't know what the term for this is. It's like a frequency graph where they have a bunch of tags on the left, and then along each line, there's a line coming from each tag, left to right. From left being less frequent, right being more frequent. And then along that, they have, whether they've broken them down into the small and large scopes, so the top and bottom halves of their categories. And then which tags are more represented and how much. And then you can see how big the difference is between them. So for instance, multiplayer, third-person, open-world, co-op are the 5... Oh, and also great soundtrack, funny enough, are the 5 categories... Oh, also the 5 top categories where the large scope games outnumber the small scope ones, which makes sense. You need more infrastructure, to make a multiplayer game, you're going to need servers. It requires constant maintenance, and usually that comes with like a live service model that also, in addition to just like server maintenance, also like balance and content updates, and it just requires more money. Open worlds are more expensive to make. Co-op games, curiously, it's not like the hardest thing. Probably not the hardest thing to make a co-op game at a small scale, but I don't know. It's probably more consistent with games that are a larger scale to have like online components to them that allow for co-op. Remake is one where the large scope games have a big lead on the smaller scope ones, which again makes sense. Bigger publishers are going to want safer bets. On the opposite end of the spectrum, the two categories in which the small scope games, actually a few categories, I would say the 3 categories, 4 categories, 5, where the small scope games have a large lead are indie, naturally, casual, interestingly enough, probably, I would say casual probably because smaller scale games tend to be a little more experimental and might not have as much of a focus on intense gameplay, although there are certainly tons of indie games with intense gameplay, but like visual novels or something like that, or very narrative heavy stripped down experiences like, I don't know, milk inside a bag of milk, something like that. 2D, again, because it just tends to be cheaper to make something in 2D than 3D or full 3D. Pixel graphics for the same reasons. Roguelike and procedural generation, as well as action roguelike, which those are kind of connected. The reason that when you go on Steam Next Fest and it feels like every action game has the roguelike tag is because you don't have to handcraft a bunch of content. You can make a bunch of components and then make up an algorithm to generate a layout for those components. It's just easier. Not to discredit like roguelike developers. I enjoy a good roguelike every once in a while, but that's literally just like the reality of the situation is, yeah, it's a lot cheaper. Dude, Rogue was made in like 1979. And the formula hasn't changed too much since then. Meanwhile, open world games weren't really a thing until like the 2000s. Maybe Daggerfall, but Daggerfall's fucking crazy. Also, hidden object games, way bigger on the small scale, which makes a lot of sense. As well, just more niche, I would say, again, more kind of low to the ground genres, such as score attack, bullet hell, tower defense, precision platformer, text-based. These are categories in which the small, the K, and the MIDI size have massively outnumber the larger scope games. Also NSFW, and then there's a huge gap between minimalist and experimental. So the small scope games, as you might expect, tend to have a lot more minimalism and a lot more experimental. I think it's funny to give a tag called experimental. There's a graph later on that talks about the estimated costs of games based on all of these categories. How did they get this data? According to them, they spent countless hours gathering hundreds of known budgets, leaks, and insider knowledge. With this data, we've built a game budget prediction model, and we'll tell you more about it next time. So I'm very curious as to what that is, what the game budget prediction model, and how accurate it actually is. So yeah, there are some criticisms. There are some criticisms of the methodology. Some people don't like the terminology. They just prefer, what if we just did single A? I've thought of single A as a term. I've talked about that before. I think it would be better to phase out indie as a category if you're talking about a game's budget. And budget and scope, because it's just not really useful. I supplied the logical term, which is single A. I think you could easily just replace MIDI with single A in your mind. And then I don't mind the K distinction. What would be below A? Z? A Z game? K games, I guess. Because again, it's not like a perfect methodology. A lot of it is based off of taking the best approximation of data. There's a ton of stuff that isn't viable. And of course, scope itself is sort of an abstract concept. So it's hard to make a super objective measurement of scope. But I think that the data that they've supplied in this study correlates enough that if you just use the basic rules that they laid out and cross-reference it against the graph of where something falls based off of disk size and team size, I'm sure it breaks down for stuff maybe from 20 years ago or before the invention of the term AAA. But for new releases or things from the last maybe 10, 15 years, I think that there's too much correlation and it makes too much sense to me to completely dismiss. And even if it's not, again, a perfect methodology, I think it has a lot more merit than just saying, well, AAA is for games that I don't like, and indie is for games that I like. Because that's just, it's to me, the purpose of breaking down these categories is to talk about the industry in helpful terms, and also to describe things it is kind of adjacent to genres. And to me, genres, the reason you have genres are to recommend things more easily to people. The scope of something, I think, is helpful in understanding trends in the industry as well as what people are interested in, especially because I agree with their theory that these different categories also have their own distinct audiences. That's something that I observe, and probably that you observe hearing about it. You probably think, yeah, I think I fit into that, or I know someone who fits more into this kind of an audience or this kind of game. And I think that is worth it's worth investigating, because this is way more interesting and way more helpful than just let's just go by feel. Yeah, Dave the Diver is an indie game. The study will be linked down below. I am very curious as to what this game budget predictor is. But yeah, I really enjoyed this article from HushCrasher, and I am looking forward to where this goes and where this, what other stuff this blog could come up with, because this was really fascinating. All right. We're done talking about math. Let's talk about bullshit. Namely, the cast of this new Street Fighter movie. So, I haven't been talking about this new Street Fighter movie that's coming out, I think, next year, because it's... So, for the longest time, it was I don't know if this is really gonna happen. It struck me as this project that we were hearing a lot about it before it ever got a trailer or a cast. And you hear, this person's attached to direct. Now they're gone. And just that kind of thing that makes me go, okay, is this going to end up in development hell? This feels, it had the makings of a development hell movie. And I was kind of going to hold my breath until we got more info about it. It also, big stretch, is just very confusing to me. I understand why you would want to make a Street Fighter movie, but it seems like a difficult property to tackle because of the way that Street Fighter works as a narrative. This is one of the reasons. Okay, so in Street Fighter V, they were like, we need to have a cinematic story mode like Mortal Kombat. And they made one and it sucked. And one of the reasons it sucked is that structurally it's bizarre. Well, among a number of other reasons, besides it's kind of stupid. And it's just really dumb. But the Street Fighter V story mode kind of fundamentally clashes with the way that Street Fighter has told its story for its entire history. Because it's basically trying to tell a story in the form of a single narrative experience. And it's never been how Street Fighter delivers its story. It has always told its story through smaller individual character stories. Through arcade modes. That's the way that the characters' story arcs and the developments in the plot have been delivered for 30 years. You play a character's story mode. It probably ties into other characters. Maybe they don't have anything really important to the overall plot, or they don't have anything very important that they're doing that relates to other characters. It's just a little side story. Or maybe they have something that relates to a ton of other stuff and forms by the fact that all of these characters have arcade modes that relate to each other. It forms a larger overall narrative. But everyone's kind of got their own thing going on. That's always how it's been. And trying to then take that and deliver it in the form of just a single, here it is, this is just a big chunk of story that involves everyone. It just ends up feeling really messy. Because you realize how weird it is to just get all of these characters in a room together. That's rarely how things end up. It's kind of just a bunch of people doing their own things, and sometimes they happen to overlap. So, I've always found the prospect of making a Street Fighter story, a movie, very funny. Very weird. There's been a couple attempts. Obviously, there was the Jean-Claude Van Damme movie in the 90s? Yeah, in the 90s. That's, very funny. That's a very funny movie. There's the animated movies that there's a couple of them. I haven't seen them. I think only the Street Fighter 2 one is considered that great. But a lot of them are just considered boring because they just don't really know what to do with a central story. It's hard to adapt these games because they don't have much of a core narrative. It's just people doing stuff, and then sometimes it overlaps. But okay. It seems like the project is moving forward, and in a very short amount of time, we got little things about, is this person cast for this, or they might be, and this is, we get little hints here and there, but in a very short amount of time, it's gone from, this could be a development hell to, this is really happening. They're filming it. There's probably going to be a trailer in a few months, and we have mostly the full cast, the main cast. And what a cast it is. What a cast. So, one thing, there's a couple trends going on with the casting decisions. Number one is that they got a lot of what appears to be martial artists, people with actual martial arts experience. Many of these people don't have large IMDb roles because they mostly come from the world of professional sports or wrestling. There's a number of wrestlers. Number of wrestlers here. They got Cody Rhodes. They got wait, is this guy
Oh, they got the Roman Reigns guy. I didn't realize his name was Joe Anoa'i. Hiroki Goto, who I think is like a Japanese wrestler, and he's done some acting stuff as well. All I know is people were really hyped. He has some kind of a fan base. The people were like, "Oh, they got Goto." Okay, cool. Good for him. Good for them. The other half of this is pure ridiculous stunt casting. Just weird shit. Jason Momoa as Blanca. Okay. Did Jason Momoa do wrestling? American actor. No, he... Yeah, okay. No, he was just an actor. Okay. He was not... He's one of those guys that I'm like, he looks like he could have done wrestling. But no, he's always done acting. Okay. David Dastmalchian as M. Bison, Polka Dot Man, which I am very curious as to how he does an M. Bison. Noah Centineo is Ken. Noah Centineo was a guy that I was like, was that a Vine guy? Was that a Vine guy that went to acting or something? Let's see, what's he in? He was on Disney Channel. Is that how I've heard of him? I know I've heard of him. Okay. No, he was like a Disney Channel guy, and then he went on to other stuff. He's like a teen actor. Yeah, he's like a teen movie kind of actor guy, which I haven't. That's why I'm not familiar with him. I'm sure a bunch of ladies think he's super hot. A bunch of teenage girls think he's awesome. Good for that. They got Ken. As Ken? Well, okay, hang on. He's like a... Wait, actually, that's perfect. That's actually perfect because he's a natural, like, brunette. And little-known Street Fighter lore, Ken is also a natural brunette. He just dyes his hair blonde. Ken's hair has always been blonde. That's why his eyebrows are, like, dark brown, black. Who else? Okay. There's some lady named Mel Jarnson is Cammy. She is Thai Australian. And she was Nitara in the Mortal Kombat movie. I didn't even know Nitara was in that movie. The 2021 one. I think it's a little odd to have... I don't know. Is she going to wear a wig? Is she going to dye her hair? I think Cammy with dyed hair seems weird to me. Maybe it'll look fine on camera and you won't be able to tell. But... yeah. When I talk about stunt casting, I mean 50 Cent as Balrog. 50... That sounds like a joke. That sounds like a joke. I hope there's one point where he says, "You better watch out, Ken. There's about to be blood in the sand." I hope he's playing 50 Cent Blood in the Sand at some point. He got a haircut. He got the Balrog haircut, which, okay, that's dedication. I can't think of a single person who would willingly rock that haircut. I've never seen it before. The weird, like, claw-shaped hairline. But respect for that. Some guy named Orville Peck as Vega. I didn't know who this was. He's like a musician. And his thing is that he wears a mask. He always wears masks. That's his thing. So they got him to be the guy who wears a mask. Brilliant. Brilliant. Who else? Oh, some lady named Kalina Liang as Chun-Li. Kat, I remember we looked her up, and the first thing Kat says was, "Damn, they gotta start feeding her." It's gotta get bigger. She is also apparently like very, very few. She's only got 4 credits on the IMDb's. Again, someone who I believe also comes from like an athletic sports world, which is not like I'm not opposed to forgetting a lot of your main characters who I'm assuming are going to be doing most of the fighting to be actual martial artists and have a martial artist background. One of the weirdest... Okay, again, stunt casting. Okay. When I say stunt casting I think has a slightly different meaning nowadays. Because it's not just about, what? That guy? It also has to do with social media presence. There's an interview with like a Matt Damon or someone like that where he's talking about how there are some casting directors, some, not all, people are individuals, but there are some casting directors who have been casting movies based off of social media presence. That essentially an actor being in a movie isn't just the name recognition, it's also that they serve as organic marketing that they don't have to pay for. They just say, hey, promote the new movie, which the actor already wants to do to promote their movie. So some of these are definitely just... We want them to mention it on their Twitter and Instagram and their or whatever social media channels that they have to get more eyes on the project. And this movie has like a lot of that. Such as one of the weirdest ones, Andrew Schultz as Dan Hibiki. If you don't know him, I actually used to be a big fan of Andrew Schultz until like, I don't know, 2021, something like that. Around that time, Andrew Schultz is a stand-up comedian who got very notorious, popular, I guess, for embracing YouTube as a platform to publish stand-up on. And that weren't just like clips. Like he uploaded like full specials that were very popular. And they were kind of like miniature documentaries about being a comedian in New York and stuff. And it was kind of interesting. And what I liked about his comedy is that he was like a crowd work guy, but he did it in like a pretty kind of interesting high stakes way where he went like really deep on parts of people's identity, like race and religion and sexuality and stuff. But he would always kind of like pull it around to where like if the joke failed, it's going to be really, really bad. But if you like pull it around, it's like really funny to that person, right? Like a joke that could be offensive, but has like a certain level. There's like an appreciation for that person's, like, I don't know, their religion or whatever. And that's like the basis of the joke. And it comes out on like kind of a positive end. And then for his like, I was going to say constructed stand-up. That's like a card game term. How weird. Draft stand-up or constructed limited stand-up. That's actually, wait, no, that's what crowd work is. It's limited. Yeah, because you just take from whoever's in the crowd. I guess draft was, what does that be? Improv? Wait, this is a good, someone make a video game based on this. Someone make a game. You could probably make a comedy card game based on that. Anyway, his like pre-written material, I'll just say constructed material, was then also kind of in a similar vein where it was like kind of like what I liked about it was that he would take these premises that were extremely offensive, like what's the most offensive possible opinion, but instead of like playing to like the racist angle of it, to find some kind of like work backwards. The idea would be like, how could you tell like the most racist joke about black people possible, and then kind of work backwards so that a black person would find it hilarious. And that was really fun, and I liked it a lot. And that like it tied into him getting the crowd involved and all that. And I actually used to be a big fan of his work. And then he got like really popular. And he did that thing that a lot of comedians do where they're like, well, you know, he's already doing kind of he's in like the realm of edgy stuff. So he's like, I'm gonna start talking about politics. This was around the pandemic, and that was the point where I was like, damn, this guy is not smart enough to talk about this shit. So he kind of ended up, it's this interesting case where someone's kind of like a tool, right? Where, okay, so he was part of like this podcasting circuit where like he had, okay, the best way I can describe this is he would have like fucking Donald Trump on, and Trump is talking about whatever bullshit. And Schultz is like, oh yeah, no, that actually, like, that makes a lot of sense. And then like a month later, he has Bernie Sanders on. And Bernie Sanders is talking about like socialism. And Schultz goes, like, literally the exact opposite ideology, like premises that Trump is putting out. And Schultz goes, no, actually that makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah, I get it, actually. In the way, Andrew Schultz represents the median voter, in the sense that most people's political opinions aren't really based on any kind of like theory or really strong philosophy. If anything, it tends to be based on their moral philosophy, which leads to a lot of like almost incomprehensible gibberish of things that are totally conflicting or opinions that can change on a dime, because there's no like really strong foundation for what they believe. It's just kind of vibes based. And he is like, what if you gave that person a huge multi-million viewership audience and a bunch of like politicians who were eager to reach those people? And it was like, damn, this guy was kind of complicit in like the rise of fascism in the United States. That sucks. Get him off the couch. Get him off that microphone. Unlike me, you know, who, when I talk about politics, I am the most enlightened, intelligent person ever. Yeah, so there's a lot of people who hate him for, like, I guess reasonable reasons. I haven't watched his stand-up in forever. I just really again, the other thing is a lot of comedians, they're like, wait, it's just way easier to do a podcast. Kind of like this. Kind of like how this is way easier than doing my main thing. It's way easier to do a podcast. And so they just kind of focus on that. And I'm like, I really do not care to listen to like the political takes of a guy who said that he votes for political parties based off of how much pussy it seems like they get. And like, that's real. That was a real thing he said. And he's Dan Hibiki. Why? Because, well, first of all, like, I think terrible casting, just visually. Dan Hibiki should look like Steven Seagal. He should look like a big oaf. Andrew Schultz is like a skinny Italian guy. So I guess because he's a comedian and he has a big audience, that's why he's cast. That's why he's cast as Dan. What possible role could Dan have in the Street Fighter movie? What could he possibly do in the plot? So I don't know. Again, just bizarre stunt casting. And then maybe also actually the funniest one, Eric Andre as Don Savage, a character I did not know until I looked him up and I realized he's the guy in the background of Balrog stage. He's like the ring announcer. To be completely honest, this casting only happened because the director is a guy named Kitao Sakurai, who directed a bunch of episodes of the Eric Andre show. So cool. I like Eric Andre. Let's look at the director's. If you look at the director's filmography, he's got a lot of Eric Andre stuff. He directed the movie Bad Trip. This is also the Eric Andre. Yeah, this was Eric Andre's like what would you call that? He was like doing his. That was the movie where he was doing his prank thing. It was like he was playing a character, but they were playing actual pranks, kind of like they would do on the Eric Andre show, but within the context of being part of a plot. Also directed 4 episodes of the Twisted Metal TV show. So I heard that was good. Good for him. This is like an interesting movie because a lot of the people attached to it are not necessarily like dramatic actors or action actors, or I forgot that there's a character for fucking Joe. They got Joe in this. Oh yeah, Akuma is cast? Yeah, that's who Roman Reigns is. The character choices also confuse me. I have no idea what the fuck this movie's gonna be about. I guess Street Fighter 2? Because they got Bison. They've also got Akuma. Akuma does not have a presence in Street Fighter 2 besides essentially a cameo role. He's barely canon to that game. Joe, who's like a random guy from Street Fighter 1. I don't even remember who Marvin is. Who is Marvin? Street Fighter Marvin? He's Is he an original character? I guess he's an original character. Oh wait, there's a Polygon article. Okay, yeah. No one knows who Marvin is. He's a new guy. Also, Julie. Interesting. I guess that, so there's a little bit of alpha stuff with Dan and Julie. I guess Julie's just gonna be like a side, because they've got Vega, Balrog, no Sagat. Interesting enough. So Vega, Balrog, I'm guessing Julie is just gonna be like a side, like an assistant to Bison. A lot of people who have like martial arts experience, not a ton of like large acting roles. The director has some credits under his belt, a lot of short films stuff, a lot of TV episodes, stuff that is like, well received, but like comedies. And I guess Twisted Metal, is that why they got him? Because he did Twisted Metal? So I have no idea what to say. This movie feels like a total coin flip. I'm hoping that it's either going to be really good or really bad in a funny way, and that it gets a sequel. I would love a series of stupid Street Fighter movies, because Street Fighter, at its core, is a very silly, dumb series. I love Street Fighter, I love its characters, and in many ways I love its lore, but it is also dumb as fuck. And I love it for that. I was trying to think about, like, oh, what are they going to do? How are they going to get this guy? What are they going to... And then I realized, I can't even tell you, like, what Street Fighter's tone is. Is it like goofy? Is it serious? Is it a dramatic story? Is it dumb? Is it cheesy? I have no idea. I could not tell you what is like the overarching thing, in the same way that I could tell you kind of like the vibe of Mortal Kombat or Tekken or Guilty Gear or something like that. Or Soul Calibur or any of those other stories. Like I can picture what a movie of those would look like if you were to adapt them. I could not imagine what a Street Fighter movie would look like, because the series lore has always been very like kind of flying by the seat of their pants and a bunch of just doing a bunch of random shit. So you could take that and tell a very serious dramatic action story, or maybe one with a little bit of comedy. You could tell a ridiculous action comedy story. You could do something in between. I have genuinely no clue. I've got no idea. You cast David Dastmalk. You got Polka Dot Man as M. Bison. What else is he in? He's an Oppenheimer. Well, everyone's an Oppenheimer. He's in, He was in Svengoolie? Wait, what? He was on an episode of Svengoolie? Wait, you didn't tell me about that. In 2024, I didn't know they were still producing new episodes of Svengoolie. Is that a local thing? Hang on. Do people know what Svengoolie is? Svengoolie is a Chicago-based horror movie anthology program. It's one of those, like, you know, you might know Elvira, where they just have like a goofy-looking, scary haunted house-themed host, and they show old horror movies with little skits before and after commercials. Yeah. Where does it air? We used to get it in Chicago. That was on the Me TV. I think it was also on the U. WCIU. Where does it air? Where does Svengoolie air? Recent years has expanded nationally. Okay. Yeah, that's like a very Chicago thing. And when I moved and I realized people didn't know what Svengoolie was, it kind of threw me for a loop. You don't know Rich Kaz? He would also do, before Svengoolie, he was the host of a different, I guess, anthologies show, which was just the Three Stooges. And I watched a ton of Three Stooges with my dad and my brother growing up. And I love the Three Stooges because of that. Oh, that's weird. David Dastmalchian is also the Flash. He also voice acts the Flash in a bunch of stuff, which is funny. He's in a bunch of DC stuff, I guess. He was in Dune. He was Calendar Man in the Long Halloween movie. Bunch of random stuff. Yeah, I'm not that familiar with him besides him in The Suicide Squad. Oh, he's a Chicago. He did a bunch of work in Chicago. Interesting. He was a circus performer in Alaska. Hang on. After college, David worked as a professional fisherman in Alaska, a circus performer, a movie theater usher, and a playwright. What an interesting guy. I like that guy. Anyway, that is the Street Fighter cast. It feels completely up in the air. I'm gonna commit to it's either gonna be incredibly. I don't think the movie's gonna be middling. I think it's either gonna be incredibly surprising. I think it's gonna be surprisingly good or hilariously bad. Speaking of movies, Kat and I went to see Toy Story the other night. It's the 30th anniversary of Toy Story, and so a number of theaters are doing screenings of the movie, which I think I am a big fan of the trend of reruns in theaters. I think it's actually a huge missed opportunity, especially when there's a lot of movies that are maybe like, I don't know, the film industry seems like it's in a weird spot, and I think that for theaters, doing reruns would be a cost-effective way to get people back to theaters, especially because I wonder how much of a cut the studio takes if it's a rerun. It might be less, honestly. Like, it might be more profitable. And also, just there's a lot of movies, like, going to the theater to see movies is it's a specific experience. Some movies really warrant it. Like if you could see a Lawrence of Arabia on the big screen, you'd be like, "Ooh, I want to go to that." What else would be good? Just a bunch of classic movies. The Matrix. The Matrix. I think that got some rescreenings. That's one of those movies that's like, actually, yeah, that would be a cool movie to see on the big screen. So Toy Story got a screening for its 30th anniversary, and, you know, I wasn't the most excited to see it, just because I've seen Toy Story so many times. Toy Story and The Lion King were the two movies that were hallmarks of movie days in class when I was growing up. If we had a free day or a free period or something like that, and we said, oh, we'll watch a movie, the defaults were always Toy Story and The Lion King. And so I felt very familiar with both of those movies just because I'd seen them so many times. But there's a value, I think, in seeing it again with the eyes of an adult who has, you know, taste and a discerning palate. And, you know, I can pay attention to stuff and notice little things that make me appreciate them more. Like, on a rewatch of The Lion King sort of recently when Kat was showing me all the Disney animated movies, there were some things that I picked up on that I actually really appreciated. Like, I thought the script was really good. And I wasn't really able to appreciate that when I was a kid. Toy Story is actually in the same boat. I forgot how good of a movie Toy Story is. That's a really good family movie. Like, a good movie for kids. I think it's a good movie for families. It has a lot of thought put into it. It's very clever. There's a lot of jokes that I think are funny, like very clever now. I was surprised at how, I don't want to say adult it feels, but it's got a more 90s feel. Does that make sense? When I've talked about older Disney movies in the context of how much silence they use, like how much quiet there is, and it gives it a real different mood. Toy Story is one of those movies where it has plenty of score, but there's a lot of scenes that are just kind of quiet. It is, again, like slightly more, like a little, just a tinge darker than I remember. Like, it's not like a super bright, fluffy, happy story where all of the rough edges have been sanded off. It has like a little bit of roughness, a little bit of intensity, a little bit of seriousness. The characters are more or less adults, which is kind of funny to think about. They act like adults. They have kind of adult mindsets, or more mature mindsets, despite being toys and living in a toys world. They don't have, it's not like Care Bears or something, right? Where you're watching like baby brains at work. It's like these are adults with adult mindsets and thought processes, and they have things that they care about that are important to them, and they kind of like the concept of your purpose and how you fit into your society and your community is a big part of the movie, and that's something that is like a little bit complex for a kid. But they communicate it in such a way that I think I got the message as a child without really like having to beat me over the head with it. Man, this is a very clever movie. There's a lot of things that, again, went over my head as a kid that now I just picked up on. Like, a lot of the jokes, you can tell that they loved Mr. Potato Head, that the animators love Mr. Potato Head, because they do so many fun little visual gags with him. They do a lot of fun stuff with the toys. I love all the stuff with the Etch-a-Sketch of the Etch-a-Sketch character drawing little different images on its screen. I guess it's a screen. I love the Potato Head stuff. The stuff with the Slinky's funny. The Slinky dog. There's tons of just like little sight gags and visual things that it feels like you can picture them having a lot of fun coming up with this stuff. Where the fact that they're toys is really integral to what you're seeing on screen. They get a lot of mileage out of the concept toys coming to life and talking. I like that aspect of it as well. I like movies. I like a lot of kids' movies that have this implication of like a hidden world. I think a lot of Miyazaki's kids' movies really touch upon that in a very powerful way for many people, like Totoro or Spirited Away. Especially something like Totoro, where as a kid, you just like don't know everything about the world. And the childlike whimsy partially comes from the fact that you just don't have all the facts about what's possible and what's impossible. And the idea as a kid that when you're not looking, that your toys come to life. And they have this, not in a creepy way, but in a... like they have this community and they care about you and they see you as this kind of like important person in their lives, and you're important to them you're important to them like they're important to you. It also kind of, in this movie especially, gives a lot of importance to like the idea of playing and playfulness as integral to like a child's development, which I think is nice. Just like a nice element to have in there. But yeah, this kind of like element of an unseen world. I'm also a big fan of, I've talked about this, about movies where there's like this other world of characters who are much smaller, and they kind of have to jerry-rig things together to function, to like make functional tools or make use of things in more interesting ways. Like they try to make a step ladder, or they try to make a ladder out of, it's kind of a rope, out of the, what are the monkeys? Like the barrel of monkeys that all their arms can all link together. Just like little stuff like that is fun. A lot of thought put into little things. Like, this is the first time I ever noticed that when they are in Sid's house, when Buzz and Woody are in Sid's house, there's that scene where Buzz wanders into a room where the dad is watching TV. He's asleep watching TV. And that's the scene where he sees the commercial for Buzz Lightyear toys. And to be honest, side note, I was kind of surprised at how good that scene is. I was surprised. That's a really good scene of a and it's something that you kind of expect, you know? They've been building up this idea that Buzz doesn't believe he's a toy. He thinks he's like a real space ranger. And then like having his whole world and his whole identity shattered, and how he sees like on the commercial, like the voice line plays, and then he presses the button and he hears the voice line. And it's this kind of like this whole unraveling of his world. I found it like shockingly effective. I found myself very engrossed in that moment. And it makes the climax, and then kind of Woody trying to help him, going from really having a grudge against him to kind of building him back up, and them becoming friends, and Woody teaching him, Woody being forced to acknowledge Buzz's value in order to make him like, well, you know, partially for Woody's own gain, but also to help Buzz. And that's kind of Woody turning the corner himself on being a little bit more, not feeling so threatened by him. A nice character development. I really liked the moment where he's they're soaring through the air, and it's like this really like elating moment where Woody finally like embraces Buzz's catchphrase, and they kind of meet and then Buzz says that they're not flying, they're falling with style. It's a nice wrap up of they've now found a common ground where they both kind of believe in each other, and they're real friends now. That was really nice. I actually found that really heartwarming. That's a nice moment. But anyway, the scene where he sees the commercial, it cuts afterwards. After the commercial, it goes back to a bowling tournament. And then a few moments later, you get a shot of Woody, who'd been hiding in the closet in the hallway, pushing the door open falling out and some stuff falls on him, including a bowling ball. And I was like, oh, it's because the dad's into bowling. The dad's a bowler. That's fun. I never thought about that before. It's just a little bit like, there's all these little touches. There's just little bits of thought put into. They really. There's a lot. Yeah. There's a lot of effort. It feels like the world exists outside of the characters and there's a consistency outside them. Toy Story. I think it actually holds up really well. I think it's still a great movie. And kind of interesting because I actually just referenced it in the Mist video when talking about graphics. And that was the first CGI film. That was the first fully CGI film. And that kind of blew people's minds when it came out in 1995. And it's a perfect concept for a CGI film because they were very aware at Pixar of the limitations of technology. And they were like, what is CG good for? It's really good at rendering. Well, it's not great at rendering like realistic organic things like skin and the skin and hair, like the simulating hair follicles and hair physics, subsurface scattering on skin, which is one of those very nerdy things that you wouldn't think is important, but it actually very much is. Just things that kind of give characters a little bit more life. Just like the limitations of poly count and stuff. You can see in the movie Buzz's face because we were watching like a very high resolution scan of the film. I guess it's a digital file version of the film, and you can see the polygons fighting on Buzz's face. You can see them overlapping and clashing, which is pretty fun. But what it is good at is rendering like inorganic materials, such as that you wouldn't expect to have a ton of detail like that, such as plastic or maybe metal, glass, things like that. They were really good at rendering that stuff. Things that you expect to be a little more reflective, a little more shiny, a little less detailed, because that's kind of what they look like in real life. And so they based an entire movie around toys. What was the second Pixar movie? Hang on. Pixar movies in order. List of Pixar movies. Their second one was A Bug's Life, which I think also similarly had... I mean, bugs aren't the most detailed thing, and it had more cartoony representations of bugs. Monsters, Inc. was where they started doing, like, I think more advanced on, like, the hair rendering. That was one of the big advancements that you could feel there. Finding Nemo also fits in that. I guess that's more like liquid stuff. Incredibles was like the big breakthrough where they finally figured out how to make interesting, appealing, stylized humans. And then they did fucking Cars and whatever. And then they did Ratatouille and they got back on like rendering interesting, like good humans. So like very clever idea to make a movie about toys. I find that funny. I appreciate that. One thing that this is not a critique of the movie. It's really about marketing. We sat down in the theater and for a re-release of Toy Story, who would you expect to be there? Well, people who grew up with the film, like Kat and myself. That includes people who are, 10 years older than us, who grew up in the 90s and stuff like that. People of that age range. But also, like, maybe did you consider that there would be, like, parents taking their kids, like their young kids who haven't seen Toy Story yet, to see the movie for the first time? Did you ever consider that? Because there were multiple little kids in the theater, and you could just tell, oh, this is their parent who knows Toy Story, who might have even grown up with it, to be honest, because it's old enough now. taking their child to see Toy Story for the first time in the theater as like a nice experience, which probably is a nice experience. So then you start the movie, and before the movie, you show like a 5-minute sizzle reel about the series that defined a generation. And then like all the basically just spoil the entire plot of the 3 Toy Story movies, the original trilogy. Like, just spoil the whole plot and all the big emotional beats, including the big emotional beats of the movie you're about to watch. And I just remember like sitting in the theater and wondering about what the experience was of the little girl sitting a few seats to the left of us. Like, what does she think of this? Is she intaking this at all? How does she process that? Honestly, she probably forgot about all that by the time the movie was like 10 minutes in. But just like, what? And that's like the nostalgia sizzle reel for the rerun I find very dumb. I find it dumb if you play it before the movie. I remember reading someone's experience online where there was like an anniversary screening of like, I think Alien? I think the original Alien. And their friend had never seen it. So they said, oh, we gotta go see it in a theater, in an audience. It's gonna be awesome. And they started the show with a fucking 20-minute like mini documentary about the making of Alien. That spoils all of the big scenes, like the fucking chest burster and all the big scenes from Alien. And it was like, oh, okay. Like, did you not consider that anyone was coming there for the first time? Put that at the end. Say, like, show up if you want to watch Alien on the big screen. And then at the end, if you're a super fan, maybe we'll have like a little 5-minute intermission, and then we're gonna play the documentary bit. Sure, just do that. Just do that. Have the screening a little earlier. It's fine. Yeah, I get annoyed. I don't know. I just get annoyed with like how grandiose like it defined a generation. It's like, okay, like it's Toy Story. Like, they're good movies, but like, chill out a little bit. Like, it's fine. It's a movie. It's okay. I don't know. I don't like the nostalgia pandering stuff. I like seeing the movie on the big screen, but the nostalgia pandering is a little cringe to me. But Toy Story, yeah, that movie holds up quite well. Honestly, still pretty funny, still pretty clever. Has a lot of care and effort put into it. And just a really satisfying, well-constructed movie for families. Still holds up. Speaking of like a sort, I don't know, I guess you'd call it a bit of a family picture. Maybe one of the first real PG-13 movies. Kat and I watched Gremlins. Both Gremlins movies, 1 and 2. She was recently watching the Red Letter Media video about ranking all of Joe Dante's films, and she's a big Joe Dante fan. And she wanted to show me Gremlins, and I was like, all right, sure. I was not expecting to like these movies as much as I did. I really didn't know what to expect. I was kind of familiar with them. They were like comedies or horror comedies. And yeah, that's kind of true. The first movie is a weird... It's a weird... I don't know. It's like a weird boogie pop type of thing. It's got a lot of, I would say, overtly appealing poppy elements. But it's got that boogie. It's got that boogie. I love the phrase boogie pop. It sucks that people aren't really familiar with it beyond maybe having heard of the light novel series. I love the phrase boogie pop. But yeah, it's kind of like in that middle ground between something that is very mass appealing, but also has just like a weird niche appeal to it. Gremlins 1 is about a small town. It's a guy played by, what is his name? Zach Galligan. Zach Galligan, he lives in a small town in, where is it, like Ohio or something? He lives in a little town where, you know, everyone knows each other, and it's a quiet little town. He goes to high school, he's a teenager, and he's working a bank job, and his dad is an inventor. He comes up with, like, this is going to be the next big thing, and it's some, like, ridiculous, weird invention, some goofy stuff, right? And, of course, it never works, and it always, like, sprays toothpaste everywhere and stuff like that. His dad is visiting Chinatown and meets an ancient Chinese mystic man in his basement. It's very silly. Who sells him... Actually, he doesn't sell him. The old guy's grandson, I guess? Or maybe son. We don't know. We don't know how much he's fucking. Sells him... The grandson, the little boy, is really the one to sell him a little creature known as a mogwai. It's a little bit unclear whether or not the creature's original name is mogwai or if the species name is mogwai, or both. And that's kind of one of the aspects I like, is there's a lot of mystery around it. This little guy comes to be known as Gizmo, named, I guess, because the father is an inventor, and, you know, he likes gizmos and stuff. And, all right. I think that's the first thing I really have to talk about. He basically buys it as a pet for his son, who already has a dog, but I guess he needs a little funny guy. I am usually pretty resistant to, like, cute little mascot characters that are obviously highly marketable. Man, Gizmo really works on me. I love Gizmo. I would protect Gizmo with my life. I care so much about that little guy. I care so much about him. I wanna cuddle him. I wanna hold him in my arms. I wanna feed him soup. I fucking love Gizmo. He makes me want to cry. I love him so much. When they're mean to Gizmo, I want to, like, punch a hole in the wall. He brings Gizmo home, and he gives him a set of very specific instructions. They hate direct sunlight. They hate bright lights, and direct sunlight will kill them. Don't let them get wet, with water specifically. And don't feed them after midnight. And he's like, okay, cool. So he explains that to his family. And he's like, here's your new pet, boy. Here's your new pet, son. And Billy, the main character, is just kind of like rocking with Gizmo. He's just like, yeah, this is my cute little guy, and I feed him, and I take care of him, and we have fun, and he watches TV. And he likes watching movies. And... okay, here's like a little detail. Part of the idea is that like the setup of where the characters are at in their lives is Billy is talking to his neighbor, and his neighbor is like, well, gee, you know, you're basically supporting your whole family, because his dad doesn't make, like, any money from his stupid invention entrepreneur thing. You're basically supporting your whole family. And Billy is working as a clerk at a bank while going to high school. So it can't be more than part-time. And they live in this massive house. They live in that. It's like a big-ass 2-story house. Probably at least 3 bedrooms. I don't know if they have a basement. Does that add value to the house? I don't know. Like a big front lawn. Like this great looking house. They've got all this furniture. Like, was that... okay, people in the 80s. People who lived in the 80s. Is that just what the 80s were like? What the hell? You could... like, nowadays where I live... Billy could be working a full-time job and his dad, and they'd be living out of their fucking car. They'd be living in, like, a shithole apartment with, like, 1 bedroom. They'd be living in a basement.
Jesus Christ. Is that actually accurate, or is that just movie bullshit? I'm really curious. He's working as an entry-level bank clerk while going to school. He's like 16. Anyway, naturally, what else happens but the rules get broken. Gizmo gets wet. In this very weird scene, you're like, oh god, what's happening to him? And it ends up like when they get wet, they multiply. I guess they reproduce asexually. And he just like splits off into little fuzzballs. They like pop out of him. And then they grow very quickly into other little Mogwai gizmos. But they're not all so friendly. And then if they eat after midnight, then they transform. They get gremlin. They get gremlin-y. They get evil and green and scaly and they turn into like kind of folklore gremlins. Gremlins in folklore are little mischief makers. They just fuck shit up. I believe the origin is actually based on airplanes. That there was like an urban or like a myth that airplane failures were the result of gremlins, ripping apart or tampering with airplane parts. That's just sort of like a little folkloric tale. That's where the terror at 20,000 feet comes from, the classic Twilight Zone thing. And is there a reference to that? I guess they're just little mischief makers, but like violently, dangerously mischief makers. They're not harmless by any stretch of the imagination. So once that happens, all hell breaks loose, and they gotta protect the town from these little green monsters. So the movie kind of progresses as it switches from this sort of light-hearted, silly family film. It ends up having there's a lot of horror scenes. There's a lot of weird horror stuff. There's a really good scene when he's walking into like the classroom and it's all dark and the projector's going. That's like the only source of light. And he finds the dead body of the professor who was looking at the mogwai that he gave to him. That's a good scene. Yeah, there's some like good tension, but the fact that they're also like mischievous means that there's also a comedic aspect. Like they're kind of silly. They're dangerous, but in like a silly way. They're a little jokery, if you know what I mean. They're little jonglers. I would say one of the best parts of the movie is how many little charm points it has. There's just like every character's got a little thing going on. He's got the neighbor who is like comically xenophobic of all immigrants. He doesn't trust the Russians. He doesn't trust the Poles. He doesn't trust foreign cars. He only trusts American-made things. And he's also very superstitious, and he believes in the gremlins and stuff like that. There's like the horrible, nasty neighbor who's like threatening to kill Billy's dog because he like knocked over like an antique of hers. Not even an antique, it's some like kitschy snowman statue in her front lawn that he knocked over, the dog knocked over, and she's like, I'm gonna fucking kill your dog slowly and painfully. And she gets killed in an awesome way. She gets rocketed out the goddamn window. It's awesome. It's mostly just like a consistently entertaining horror comedy where the characters are in imminent danger, but the circumstances are just kind of ridiculous. And there's some moments of effective tension, there's some moments of effective comedy, and it's rare that a movie manages to thread the line between those, but Gremlins really pulls it off in a way I find really entertaining. It's just like I wasn't expecting it to be that good. I think you hear the premise and you're like, this seems like a dumb movie. And then it's like really well made. It's better than it has any right to be. And then, tragically, the movie ends with Gizmo being taken away
back to Chinatown, which leads into Gremlins 2, which apparently was in development hell for a while until they just got Joe Dante back to make a sequel. And he decided, I really respect the creative choice with Gremlins 2, because you could have just done the first movie again. And in several ways, Gremlins 2 kind of is the first movie. It is kind of like a standard sequel, where they're just doing the same thing, but bigger. But it's doing it in a way with a different tone, such that it's basically a full-on comedy. It's practically a parody of the first movie, and to some extent, in that sense, like sequels in general. Like, it's pointing out the ridiculousness of the sequel formula that was so popular in the 80s, being a 1990 movie. So just right at the tail end of the 80s, essentially, where it's now they're at a point where they could like make commentary about the trends of the 80s with the whole decade in perspective. So the whole idea is, it's a few years later, Billy and his love interest from the first movie have moved to New York. They're dating. They've got an apartment together. The old Chinese guy doesn't want to give his land up to this like cartoonishly like yuppie vapid businessman, something Clamp, Mr. Clamp. The old man dies of like a heart attack or something. The yuppie guy scoops up the property and now wants to build some stuff on it. And this also results in Gizmo being captured, being basically seized and taken to one of the businesses that are hosted inside of his building. It's a very like Trump Towers thing. This is where the majority of the movie takes place, all inside of this one big, huge skyscraper. This one big business building, which I think is a very fun setting for a film, because it's got all of these weird businesses inside. They have a gene splicing division for some reason. He's just hosting like a genetic testing. He's hosting like the Umbrella Corporation in his building. They get a hold of Gizmo. Billy is an artist. He's like a cartoonist in the first movie, and now he's got a job as like a landscape artist. He draws like building concepts for developments that they're doing. And he catches wind that Gizmo is there. He finds him, stuffs him in a drawer, says that he'll be back for him later. And then, lo and behold, Gizmo gets out, he gets wet, and the whole cycle starts all over again. That's why it's called the new batch. But with a twist. They get into the genetic testing laboratory, and they start like just drinking different serums. It's very silly, very cartoony. They're just drinking different serums that are labeled with different things. Like one of them gets it's with like bat wings. And he grows bat wings. There's one who he drinks like a serum that just has a lightning bolt on it, and he turns into electricity. There's one that drinks a brain potion, and it makes him super intelligent and able to speak. And that's kind of the MO, is just all these goofy gremlin concepts. It's just playing around with the formula of what are all these different weird gremlin variants that we can fit in here to make it more interesting, to set up more varied set pieces and moments and things like that, or just even little sight gags, like the one that's made out of vegetables. Now, of course, this leads to Billy and what's her name? Kate. Billy and Kate having to stop all the gremlins, but bigger now, because what if the first one was in a small town, but what if they get out into New York City? They're going to cause so much havoc, they'll be unstoppable. They'll just keep multiplying. This movie is really funny because in a lot of ways it's like, it's like a parody of movies. There's all of these plot elements that you would think would go somewhere and just comedically don't. Like, the one that grows bat wings then drinks an sunlight serum. And he becomes immune to the sun. And you're like, oh my god, this is going to be a big deal. This is going to be a big deal. And they send that gremlin out. And you're like, oh, this is going to cause a big catastrophe. And then, no, he just gets dumped in concrete by the xenophobic guy who's there visiting New York with his wife. He just gets beaten with like a shovel. And he just dunks him in concrete. And he turns into like a little gargoyle. And it goes nowhere. And it's built up as this big thing. It goes nowhere. The reason it's there is to have a funny scene. There's this whole plot thread about how Billy's boss has the hots for him. And she like invites him out to dinner. And she like tries to give him a foot job under the table. And Billy is sort of humoring her because he sort of wants a promotion. But you can tell he's not really into it, and he really doesn't want to cheat on his girlfriend. But Kate sees them going out, and she's like, And I thought it was going to be a bigger deal, but she is, like, refreshingly pragmatic. She's not like, Billy, I hate you. She says something during the movie to the effect of, Billy, if we survive to tomorrow, you're in big trouble. Which is the perfect way to handle that. She's like, let's just work on this so that doesn't happen again. Let's just save the city, and then I can get on your ass for fooling around with other women. And then by the end of the movie, it's resolved. She's like, oh yeah, you're actually like, there's really like, yeah, I believe you. You're not actually messing around with her. It's fine. And it's just cool. It's fine. There's other things with like, oh my god, speaking of Svengoolie, there is a very Svengoolie-esque character in Grandpa Fred, who's like this older guy. He hosts like a horror variety show on the Clamp network. And it's one of the channels that they own. And he really wanted to be a news anchor. And then, but he's consigned to this life of being like a gimmicky horror host. And then during the Gremlin invasion, he just grabs a guy with a camera. He's specifically Asian guy with a camera, which is such a specific archetype that if you've ever been around you've seen that guy. Asian guy with camera. Any kind of tourist trap. And he gets him on and he's his cameraman and he starts like guerrilla broadcasting from inside of the building covering the Gremlins crisis. And it's great. And the stupid Clamp guy, Yuppie Man, is like looking at all the TV screens and he sees Grandpa Fred doing the thing and he stares at it and he goes, Dracula? Like, he doesn't even know his own guy. He doesn't even know his own employee. He doesn't recognize him. He's still wearing, like, the full makeup. And the costume and everything. And then by the end, that pays off. It's just like it's just an excuse to have fun scenes with gremlins doing goofy shit. And it's not really a horror movie. It really has none of the horror vestiges of the first movie. It's just a full-on comedy, which I think is a good approach. Just redoing the first movie in both structure and tone might have been a little much. But Gremlins 2 really is its own thing, and I know a lot of people prefer it. I don't know if I actually prefer either of these movies over each other. I think they both have kind of fun things to offer, and sometimes it's more of a Gremlins 1 kind of mood. Sometimes it's more of a Gremlins 2. But I think they're both totally worth watching, and there's tons of funny stuff in them. I found Gremlins 2 really funny,
There's okay, it's a big parody of CNN, and like the big the big multimedia news empire. The guy is named Clamp. His network is called the Clamp News. Clamp. Is it Clamp? No, it's not Clamp News Network. It's Clamp Corp News, I think. Hang on. What is it? What is the acronym? CCN. Yeah, Clamp Cable Network. It's CCN, which is a clear, riff on CNN. One of the things I found odd, or that I picked up on, there's a moment in the movie where he is convinced that, like, this is it, and he's really excited because he finally gets to play the Clamp Cable News Doomsday Tape. And he puts it on, and I was like, oh, this is a reference to a real thing. And Kat wasn't aware of this. That tape that he plays with, like, all the idyllic nature videos and, like, the world is ending, we'll be on the air until it's done. That is a reference to a real thing that CNN has. Back when the network was first formed, Ted Turner insisted, I guess he was just really afraid of the apocalypse. And Ted Turner commissioned a video called, excuse me, you look up, it's called the CNN Doomsday Tape, that they were to air on a loop in the event that there was a world-ending situation of some sort. And it's very eerie. It is it's a performance of some, it's a choral performance of some, like, American hymn, some patriotic song. Is it? Hang on, let me look it up. CNN, Doomsday Video. The Turner Doomsday Video is the internal title of an apocalyptic video intended to be broadcast by CNN at the end of the world. Created at the discretion of CNN founder Ted Turner before the network's 1980 launch. Is a performance of the Christian hymn Nearer My God to Thee, performed by multiple members of the U.S. Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine bands. Now, what I find interesting about this is that I didn't know this. This was not a publicly known like, we didn't have the tape until 2015. It was leaked by an intern who had heard of it from a former professor who had formerly worked at CNN, and said, oh, there's this rumor about this Doomsday Video. And I guess he found it, and I imagine most people had not thought about it since it was recorded, and leaked it online. And so we didn't know what was actually on it. There was, before the leak, there was a single rumor about it that I can see. Okay, well, hang on. Well, not exactly. Okay. So before Gremlins is 1990. The first public knowledge of this is in 1988, where the New Yorker published an article about the tape. I'm assuming it was some kind of insider thing, just describing it. In 2009, oh, wait, hang on. No, wait. I misread this Wikipedia article. The video did not become publicly available until 2015 when a writer for Jalopnik revealed a copy of the video that he had recorded during a 2009 internship. Yeah, so there was basically nothing about this tape for decades besides that one article. And Joe Dante made a version, basically made a parody of this thing, which is really odd. Really interesting. It's not necessarily like... It's not exactly like super accurate. I think it's just like this hymn in the actual video. Apparently Joe Dante said that they made the better one, which is pretty funny. So he just made that based off of a pure rumor. Very funny.
Anything else about Gremlins 2? I still love Gizmo. I love Gizmo so much. He's probably the most effective Scrimblow I've ever encountered. Yeah, I think that they both hold up really well. They're both a lot of fun. I think they're funny. They're really good at doing what they set out to do. There's a great parody. Oh my god, the fucking parody of the Christmas story from like the personal tragic anecdote about Christmas from the first movie that gets parodied in Gremlins 2, where in the first movie she's like, I don't like Christmas, and she goes into this whole long, they're in some like highly dangerous situation, and she just stops everything to tell him about this tragic backstory she has about what happened on Christmas. And it's this like ridiculous fucking story about her dad pretending to be Santa Claus and getting stuck in the chimney and suffocating to death. It's like the most ridiculous shit ever. Could he not call for help? And then in Gremlins 2, she starts doing the same thing, but about Abraham Lincoln's birthday. You can see Zach Galligan trying not to laugh in that scene because she's doing a really good job committing to the bit. It's great. What else is she in? Phoebe Cates. Oh, she's in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. And Drop Dead Fred. And Lego Dimensions as Kate Berenger. Was there a Lego Dimensions Gremlins expansion? Okay. Whatever. In any event, yeah. Gremlins. And Gremlins 2. Good. You should watch them. Put them on sometime. And with that, I'm going to draw this to a close. Thank you so much for listening, if you've been listening this far. If you have a comment, feel free to leave it down in the comment. If you have a question, feel free to leave it down in the comments below. But please phrase it in the form of a question, because I'm not just going to read your thoughts out loud. I'm going to start working on the video soon. I'm actually really excited. I think it's a fun topic. I was very spurred, very motivated to work on it. It's going to be maybe a little sillier. I don't know. The subject matter, I think, is inherently silly, but I'm looking forward to talking about it and seeing if I can wring anything interesting out of the topic. Check out my Patreon. You can also support me on Ko-fi. Look out for the most recent video on Myst on the main channel. And I don't have anything else to say. Goodbye.